This is a Metropole TV Weekly Big Ten. My name is Simbalaja Charles Kiage.
And I'm Brenda Nyamichaba. Welcome once again.
True, we are going to give you the 10 biggest business moments of your week as you prepare to make a proper focus for your business next week. We open the Big Ten this week by giving you a story that has rattled international headlines. That is the 7378 MAX Boeing for the Ethiopian Airlines. Now, it crashed just 6 minutes after taking off Bola International Airport, killing all the 149 passengers on board. 32 of the casualties were Kenyans, which accounted for the highest number of the passengers who lost their lives.
Now, as a result, China, Indonesia, Australia, as well as the United States grounded the aircraft. This comes 5 months after an aircraft of the same model crashed in Indonesia, killing 189 people. Now, let's take a look at the company's share price.
Now, there news that the company share price has dropped 9% after this disaster. So the question is, what is expected from the performance of the share of the company and the company in general, and why such discrepancies at this time?
The crashes are sad. It's unfortunate. My heart goes to the families that are affected. That said, on the business side, Boeing is a big, strong company. I do not think that 2 or 3 crashes would destroy the foundation of the company. In retrospect, yes, they have manufactured a new aircraft. The market has not picked up the aircraft properly. The pilots have not been well trained on the aircraft, so you are seeing a series of accidents. Of course, now governments are changing tacts about that, and they are saying that all those aircraft should be grounded. That's a lot of losses. That's a huge loss. But you'd realize that to them, one aircraft is just like a product. It's like an M-Pesa transaction for Safaricom. So I don't think that should bring down the company. The share price falling nonetheless is expected. In the short run, there will be some panic drives here and there. But of course, ultimately, the investors know what is valuable, and they will come for it when the price is at the bottom, and that will shoot the price back up. It will correct itself. So I don't see much to worry about Boeing.
The important thing to remember with Boeing is that there are a number of those planes actually. There were a number of planes in service. Of course, those have been grounded. I think the issue was related to software, software correction, a choice of software correction to an engineering issue that they had. Perhaps they should have taken a little bit more time to fix that. Of course, nobody wants the idea of a small probability of failure, which is what that the technology exposed them to. So that there was that short probability, a small probability of failure, which actually occurred with at least 2 planes. Now, with regards to why the share price fell down, of course, I think there is a probable case of negligence by Boeing. Because of the way they handled the matter. They introduced new technology. I think the argument is that they didn't update the manuals for that, and they allowed the problem to persist. And consequently, there's a risk of loss. The market is pricing in, and that's why the share price took a hit.
Now, on to the banking sector as we take a look at SACCOs. And on the last week of February, we highlighted on the Big Ten that majority of Kenyans borrowed more than they saved in SACCOs.
That is indeed true, because when we spoke about the Big Ten brand the last time, we highlighted Gakuyu Investment, where it was alleged that the owner had withdrawn upwards of 1.2 billion to fund his personal life. Now we are back again with it this week with news that SACCOs are reeling under mismanagement, fraud and bad loans that are driving the 1 trillion sector into a path of instability. This as well can cripple the whole economy.
100 billion of shillings of member savings that are lost and are at risk of being lost as more and more cases of financially struggling SACCOs come to light.
Just 3 SACCOs, that is Mwalimu, Stima and Ekeza investment SACCOs, have lost their membership in an upwards of 3.6 billion Kenya shillings to mismanagement by officials and the boards. The question is, why do we have such rampant cases of mismanagement in our companies, and how are these members going to be refunded?
This is not the first time we are seeing corruption in cooperatives. The SACCO movement regained its footing in the year 2001, 2002 after the change of government, when Kibaki came to power, and then of course more money started coming, more donor money started coming, and Kenyans decided to start saving, and the SACCO culture came back big way. The initial round of cooperatives that started in the 60s and the 70s died off in the 80s when the leaders and officials of cooperative societies across board embezzled funds. Sadly, there were no incidences of arrests or prison terms, and so there was no deterrent to such corruption, and the temptation is still there. We are a country with a culture of corruption, so it was expected that there will be temptation to put your hand in the cookie jar. As for whether the members will get their money or not, I think that will depend on whether SASRA was involved and if the SACCOs in question have, complied. That would be dependent on whether they have some sort of insurance to do with the statutory organizations and the insurance companies. Absent of that, I think that money is lost.
Now let's take a look at the weight of the money in your pocket. Analysts say the rise of the cost of living is expected to moderate further in the coming months due to the continued fall of food prices. However, there's been a gradual recovery since January that could see prices of fuel increasing.
To give this a proper footing, analysts at the Central Bank of Kenya say that a combination of lower food prices and muted demand side pressure will continue to iron out fuel prices, therefore driving inflation downwards.
It's also important to note that Kenya's inflation dropped to a 6-month low of 4.1%. But what does this mean to the mwananchi?
A drop in inflation is good for the economy. It means an increase in the value of the shilling. And a 4.1 drop is very good. You'd remember that part and parcel of the economic pillar of the Vision 2030 is to maintain inflation levels below 10%, so that over a long period of time we have a strong currency, because a strong currency means that the economy can perform better. And so then it's a good place to be. So when you have a good harvest, it means then that very goods are many and the prices fall. And so with perhaps 1,000 shillings, you can now get more food items. When, however, you have a poor harvest, the commodities are fewer. And so inflation goes up and the currency becomes weak.
We continue with the Big Ten this week, as diversification seems to be the only way to keep afloat, as the Kenya Tea Development Agency looks to put up a paper manufacturing plant as a way to grow its revenue.
The company is calling interested parties to submit proposals for a business feasibility study for paper product manufacturing. KTDA is looking to produce a range of products from tea sacks, paper bags and cement sacks.
It is worth noting that KTDA has already planted 1.6 million trees, including the 150,000 seedlings it planted last year for paper manufacturing. Is this a viable business option for the company?
So how big is KTDA's market as well? Can they take advantage of economies of scale in terms of diversification of products? What technologies do they have? All that ought to be taken into consideration.
I think the idea by KTDA to diversify into paper manufacturing is brilliant. I think it's a great idea. Ordinarily, when you are in a business that is dependent on price fluctuations, weather patterns, like agriculture, you need to anchor that business with a business that is not dependent on such fluctuating factors. And this is why you'd go into a business that is totally different from what you are known for. In the years past, before Mumias Sugar came down, they had diversified into bottled water. They had diversified, I think, into soft drinks. They had diversified into power generation. So that then you have a strong base, because agriculturals are too sensitive to price fluctuations, to weather patterns, and etc. And so the strategy by KTDA to go into tree planting was awesome. But then again, just having the trees without necessarily a manufacturing idea that can feed into the tree planting was halfway there. And so the paper manufacturing idea is good. They already have vast lands. They already have trees, which is the raw material, the principal raw material in this. It will not be too difficult. It will not be too costly to set up, so that the setup cost and the extra operational cost is minimal. I think it's a great idea.
Before we take a break, let's take a look at the creative industry. And if you're an individual who participates in this industry, this story is for you. Now, Simba, tell me, what is your favorite movie so far this year?
I don't know whether I don't have a life in 2019, but here's the thing. I've not gotten time to go watch a movie.
Me too, actually. I haven't watched it.
So should we want to watch a movie together this weekend? What can we pick?
We'll discuss right after the weekend.
Can we watch What Men Want?
Yes, we can.
All right, now to put this into a proper perspective, we do know that local artists that is both in music and film have put the Kenyan name in the global map. Guys like Lupita Nyong'o, we have Eddie Gathegi, and Wisodera. Yes, but is the creative industry or economy going anywhere?
The creative economy has had a global upswing increased by the purchasing power of millennials, playing as the major contributor to the gross domestic product.
Now, the global market on creative goods has doubled in size from $208 billion in 2002 to a whopping $500 billion in 2015, and these are statistics according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development.
Now, the question is, why is our content consumed the least globally, and what is the significance of the creative industry to the economy as a whole?
The creative products or creative services are consumed not by hungry people. They are middle class targeting products. For instance, you don't expect me to go buy a piece of art when I'm struggling to put food on the table. You don't expect me to go to a concert when I am struggling to pay my rent. And so then the creative economy is generally a middle class targeting economy, as it were. When you have an underperforming economy, therefore, usually you do not have a strong culture that consumes such a product or such an industry. But there are claims that the African middle class is expanding significantly. This is why perhaps Churchill Live is doing well, going, I think, into their 10th or so year. This is why more music is being consumed locally. But is it iTunes that people are downloading music from, as opposed to pirated music like before. This is all very good. How do we expand this further? To me, I think there are two ways of doing it. One is, of course, make sure that people have more disposable income, and that is by creating employment. And two, have a culture. Ensure you enhance the culture of consuming creative industry products. I see companies like Safaricom have come up with the Michael Joseph Center that help to promote such a culture. There are other organizations like Goethe Institute, like Alliance Française, and I think the Chinese Center at the University of Nairobi that are also trying to promote culture. Why are we not penetrating the international scene as opposed to the others? And I think there the major factor is investment. If you are producing videos that can only be enjoyed in Kibera, surely you do not expect them to make it to the Paris festival of this world. Or if you're producing films that are not going international. But at the same time, I also think that as a community of, as a nation, we do not appreciate local content as much. There's a lot of exposure that has its advantages and disadvantages. So the disadvantage is sometimes you compare what you have watched internationally and what you're watching on the local scene, and it doesn't compare. So that calls for a lot of investment. If the government can set up significant amount of money to put into the creative industry, so that then we can enhance the quality and make it international. But you do know that even carvings and chiondos is still part of the creative economy, and it's hitting international markets.
Well, Big Ten takes a short break. Remember, you can catch more of this episode on our social media platforms, and that is
at Metro TV KE on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube. Don't go anywhere. Know about business terms is something I love doing. You've heard of the word debit. This one I know you know.
We are keen on actively playing our role in positioning Kenya as an investment hub for East and Middle Africa.
Welcome back to the Big Ten.
So indeed, well, it's now an end of an era for multinationals in the country, as the National Land Commission has ruled that the expiry of leases should be strictly capped at 99 years from the 999 years, in line with the 2010 Kenyan Constitution.
The Commission said that multinationals should work with counties and local communities who suffered historical injustices from the expired land leases.
This ruling comes as a win for developed units who have always demanded for the takeover of tea companies that have existed in the country since the colonial era. Question is, why has this ruling taken so long, and what are the ripple effects to the local communities?
There are communities that have uprooted their coffee plantations, if I remember clearly, and instead planted watermelons and said to hell with the coffee because of the international price fluctuations, because the middlemen are getting the bigger chunk of their money. And so with smaller players getting a hold of this land, it casts a shadow on our tea production as a country, and whether that will proceed in the unforeseeable future. And so it's a double-edged sword. On this end, it cuts the economy. We do not know how the foreign exchange earner will perform in the future. On the other hand, it means well for the community owning their own land.
I have not seen adoption of leasehold affect investments in urban areas, so I'm reticent to say it will affect investment in the tea farms. But then again, we will have to see. I think there has to be a test case to see what happens when the 99 years ends.
Now, Brenda, if you know, we've already spoken about the real estate sector countless times on the Big Ten. Some analysts will tell you that the real estate sector is already in a real estate sector bubble. Others will tell you there is no real estate sector bubble. Others will tell you it's already burst a long time ago. Brenda, let's put this story, therefore, into perspective.
Yes, now onto the real estate sector as we take a look at a 384 million Kenyan shilling luxury residential houses that were put up for auctioning after its developers, that is Peter and Susan Mariah, failed to settle a loan.
Now, Tierra Villas is part of the real estate empire Suraya that is valued at billions of shillings. Why do we have so many non-performing loans in this sector, and what does this translate to the real estate sector?
Typically, when most people are talking about real estate sector, they're referring to residential real estate, but it's wide. So you've got commercial real estate, you've got industrial real estate, you've got residential real estate. The question is whether residential real estate will collapse. I don't believe so. You see, if you look at the countries which have seen a collapse in the real estate sectors, is because banks were very, very leveraged, and they were therefore incapable of waiting it out for the market to correct and for inventory to clear. But I think we don't have that dynamic. I think Kenya, most banks have, the assets are financeable about 20% equity, the rest debt. If you look at America, by the time they're collapsing, the average typical bank had about 4 or 5 parts of equity. 4 or 5% equity for total assets. So meaning that about 95% of that balance sheet is leveraged. So you can imagine. So I think our industries have more staying power because banks are better capitalized here.
Moving on to the transport sector, and this time round, it's good news as another deal is on its way. Now, the Chinese firm that built the standard gauge railway is set to clinch a 2.5 billion Kenyan shilling contract to refurbish the Nairobi commuters' railway network in a single source deal tabled before the cabinet.
That is indeed true, as the Transport Secretary James Macharia now wants the cabinet to approve China Bridges and Construction Company for the project without setting it for competitive bidding, citing the lack of local firms with the capacity to undertake such a project. Now, don't we have enough workforce or workforce with such ability, and is the project worth the expenditure?
In engineering, it's not so much about the papers you have, it's so much about the experience you have. And one of the partnerships that the government of Kenya sought with the Chinese road constructors and the railway constructors was that we have some sort of apprenticeship in partnership with the local universities, so that when they are doing the work assigned to them, these graduates or these students can look at the work they are doing and learn. That was not implemented. It has not been implemented to date because none of these international partners want you to be empowered to do this on your own. They are enjoying the contracts that you're giving them, and they don't want to let them go. But coming back to the actual deal of the Nairobi railway system, I think leaders should be honest enough to say the only reason we are going to the Chinese is because of the 10% cut that you get immediately you give them the job. And it's not just to the county level, it's at the national level, it's the parastatals, it's the ministries. Everybody is going to the Chinese because you are sure you're going to get your cut somewhere in your account, the 10% cut.
More productive an economy, the more they can take some of these projects. So you, like Switzerland have, and I think US are probably one of the few countries that have companies that have ground boring technology. Why do they do that? Why are they few countries that do that? It's because of accumulation of capital, right? This capital is what allows you to do some things that others are not able to do. And if you look at the difference between, say, a country like Kenya, for example, and a country like France, the difference is not in quality of workforce. I think we are more or less similar. The difference is capital, but it takes a bit of time when you've got this machinery to understand how it works and whatnot, and you've got the companies that do that, that allow you to do that. So unfortunately, we don't have train making companies. I don't know if there's any part of the train that we can actually make locally. So entrusting a project of that nature to a Kenyan contractor, I think, will be responsible.
Okay, and then so that amount, do you think it's worth the expense?
Now that's an interesting question because typically and globally you'll find that passenger rail typically does not make money. It has to be subsidized, and this is even in the richest countries in the world. So the question we should be asking ourselves is, do we have the resources for that?
Now onto the taxman, as the Kenya Revenue Authority has set its eyes on gamblers and mobile money users with plans to introduce new taxes in July as they fell short of the 53 billion Kenyan shilling target they had made in the half year.
It is indeed true, as KRA Commissioner General John Njiraini said that they are planning to introduce a 10% excise duty on betting as from the next budget.
Mobile phone-based payments are under the radar of the taxman and will be included in the expanded list of transactions. Now with all these taxes being introduced, what does it translate to the economy, and what does the Mwana Inchi have to prepare for?
You'd agree that the government has been struggling to get cash to carry out its projects, to run its programs, to pay salaries. There are county governments that have not paid suppliers 4 or 5 years later. There are actually other parastatals also in the same quagmire. And the national government. So it's a problem across board that government does not have money. It's broke. And this is why the Big Four have not picked 2 years into the second term of His Excellency the President. So they have to look for ways and means of getting this money to ensure that they deliver services. And the easier way is usually through taxation. And when the taxman comes to the economy and he wants money, he looks at the sectors that are doing well, that he feels if he gets a piece of, he will not necessarily destabilize the economy. because the tax effectiveness is a bell-shaped curve. It goes up, and then at some point it starts to be ineffective, because the more you tax, the more money you get, and then at some point you get zero money, and then at some point you start getting less money because of your higher taxes as the revenue collector, because you are then hindering economic growth, and you are hindering performance, and then there is no revenue. So when he comes, he wants a sector that he knows if he touches, it will not cause reverberations across board. And that sector in Kenya today is mobile money transfer. I think there are many industries that are still coming up that will still get into the tax bracket.
To put it in technical terms, we are on the right side of the Laffer curve, meaning the more taxes we collect, the likely the less revenues we'll get, because you're either driving business underground, or you're disincentivizing business. So I think we need to relook at this and to focus on and ask the question: what is important here? Is it government's solvency or the people's the quality of people's lives?
On to the last item of Big Ten this week, SGR. Now we all know about SGR, and Metropole TV has been following the performance of the project since its launch in 2014, and it's now emerging that Kenya earned only 10.33 billion Kenya shillings from its first year of operation, signaling that the project will take even longer to break even.
According to the National Bureau of Statistics, freight services, which started in January 2018, generated 8.72 billion Kenyan shillings in the end of the year. The data also revealed that the Chinese communication construction company sold tickets worth 1.61 billion Kenyan shillings in revenue.
The revenue was not enough to meet the operation costs that were put at 12 billion shillings. The question is SGR a dying project, and what do we expect from the future earnings of the project?
All analyses have pointed to the SGR not being sustainable, both by independent analysts ourselves, externally, and internal analysts. I have documents that are indicating that SGR on its own cannot pay the loan by which it was built. And so it's not surprising that what they have made in a year, when they were forcing cargo onto the SGR, is still not sufficient. Because the year before this, I think they did $1 billion, or was it 2 billion, merely on passenger transport. That was 2017, when His Excellency launched the passenger transport, partly for the benefit of good PR during the electioneering period. The thing was not totally ready. However, it worked, we thank God. So they made around 1 billion shillings. So now they have made 10 times, but it is still way below expectation. If you look at an annual loan repayment, I think it's around 20, or is it 30 billion, thereabouts. And so if all factors constant, even if the trains were to carry 100% capacity every day for 365 and a quarter days a year, they would still not be able to pay the loan. Even if they were to pay, they were not to pay salaries, they were not to buy fuel, they were not to pay insurance, they would still not be able to pay the loan. It's that sad. No, they are not charging $1,000. I think they are charging $500 for every container that is ferried from Mombasa to Nairobi. And for them to be effective, actually the actual price of a container that they should charge is $1,000. They can't afford to charge that because road transport charges around 75,000, and that is inclusive of transit from Mombasa to Nairobi to your premises and the return of the empty container. They can't compete with that at $1,000, which is 100,000 shillings. So the government subsidy is the only thing that is sustaining it, and moving forward, government subsidy is the only thing that can sustain it. Otherwise, we will have to hand over the security that was given for the loan, which everybody believes was the Port of Mombasa.
That's another one of our Metropole TV Big Ten for the week. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage.
And I'm Brenton Emichaba.
I'd like to thank all our experts for making this a Big Ten. It certainly was.
And remember, you can catch more episodes of the Big Ten on our social media platforms at Metropole TV KE.